Hello and welcome to Contramundum. We are back as always on Friday. I'm Andrew Iskra and this is CJ Engel. And today we are going to continue talking about Neil Shenvi's article about the woke right. Oh, the woke right. The woke right are coming to get you. They're going to destroy everything. Isn't it so terrible, CJ? Right? Does the woke right exist? No. It's a fake term made up by a bunch of weirdos. But we're going to talk about it anyway.
I like how at the beginning he pretended like it was like a well-established term.
Oh, I know. I know.
I didn't have a chance to make fun of that yet, but that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's
it's been in use for many years. Like that.
Many years, people are talking about it. Many people. Yeah, man, it is hilarious. But they're trying to create this term woke right. That the woke right is these crazy right wing guys, and they want to make it very sinful and very bad. You're very bad people, and so we're here to vindicate you if you are right wing and Christian. Right, you're not sinning if you believe in reality.
I love your titles too, like because they're provocative. You know,
that's the point. That's the point. Yeah,
you're getting lots of eyes on this. The algorithm loves it. Juicing our numbers, man.
Yeah, that's right. So, without further ado, we're gonna open up. If you haven't watched yet, go back. You could go back and watch the last two videos because we
at least don't want you to know this, but they're completely accessible.
Yeah, they're free. We're not charging for these ones, so you can watch them. But we're on part D in I don't even know the outline.
Yeah, chapter 4.
Yeah, it's long. Part D, ethnocentrism. Right. So he says fourth.
This will be a fun one. This is gonna be the juicy one.
Yeah, it is. Fourth, ethnic identitarianism, meaning the exaltation of your ethnic identity over your identity in Christ, is a major problem on both the woke left and the woke right. On the one hand, having an ethnic identity is not sinful any more than it is sinful to have a family identity, a regional identity, a national identity, or to identify with a hobby or with your favorite baseball team. Oh,
okay. I mean, nice. Finding your identity in like consumptive activities is kind of retarded. So we'll leave those two.
It is very F and G, man. It's very F ampersand G.
Yes.
That's all I got to say about that.
But the over your identity in Christ is a nice little cheap shot, because what happens is you can't actually prove it, but you can always accuse people of it. So like, I don't know. It's one of those disclaimers or whatever that it makes it impossible to prove, which also makes it impossible that you can't defend yourself, right? Because you have to agree with them.
It's a combination of a Jesus juke and a Kafka trap. That's what it is.
There you go.
Right? It's a Kafka Jesus juke, whatever. I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
We're not as good at neologisms as Neil, but that's what it is. Like it's something that's not like you can't disprove the accusation, right? Kafka trap, and it's a Jesus juke. It's saying that the gospel is the most important thing, and this other thing that you care about, you caring about that thing means you care more about the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? Yeah. That's it. Both of those things combined, and you cannot disprove either of them, right? And on top of this, right? I mean, think about it this way. I mean, when we talk about ethnicity and race and things like that, if it gets all muddled because American identity is sort of nebulous. I mean, it's not undefinable or anything like that, but it's not as obvious or clear as like if we were British or if we were German and living in Germany, right? It's like we could sing, right? We could sing. You want to sing with me, CJ? You know,
we're gonna get.
We could sing that, right? Deutschland and Deutscher, right? We could sing that, and right we would go to jail in Germany, but there's nothing morally wrong from a Christian standpoint to be able to say that, right? Germany is for Germans. It's not for Algerians and Afghans and Turks, right?
Do you think?
But I think Neil would say that view. I mean, based on everything he says here, and we're going to get into it a little more. Neil would say, right? That, I mean, maybe we'll get a chance to talk to him about these things, or you will. I'll moderate. I'll just keep my mouth shut. Uh, but
Yeah, right.
I will. I promise.
Okay.
And uh, right, and he could correct me if I'm wrong, but like, it'd be fun to ask him. Hey, Neil, do you think that the L'amour toujours edit that they sing in Germany right now, that people are going to jail for, right? Do you think that's sin? Like, if you were a Christian in Germany and you're at a party and they start singing that, would it be a sin for you to participate? To sing
Mhm.
along with? Would that be a sin? Right. I'm curious what he would say. Right. I think. I won't pick on Neil as much. I think Owen Strahan would say, yeah, it's a sin. Right. That's a sin. Actually, he would say, yes, it's a sin. Any, anyway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Neil would say yes, but we're fair
I
and
don't
balanced
so
here. We'll, I'll,
I don't think Neil would think that's a sin.
yeah,
Um,
you don't.
that
Why?
that they could say that you're cutting out, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
So you mean that Germans can't say that Germany is for Germans?
Yeah, that's
I don't.
ethnic. I mean, just look at what he's saying here. You're exalting your ethnic identity over your identity in Christ.
Yeah, but well, okay. So
If you're a German Christian and you
I
sing
don't
that
think.
song,
Yeah. I don't
because
think you're.
the what about there would be, what about the refugee that came here from Algeria that says he's a Christian now? That's your brother in Christ, and now you're saying we should exclude him from your country. You're
Mm,
putting your ethnic identity over
I think
your
you would.
brother in Christ. I think he
Yeah.
would. I think he
Interesting.
would. So let's continue on and flesh this out more, and then we can make a judgment about that if he would or not,
Okay.
just based on the extant writing. Um, so he says, on the other hand, Philippians 2 teaches that all our identities are to be counted as rubbish or dung compared to the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus. Again, another Jesus juke, right?
Hmm.
It's another Jesus juke, right? That's what he's doing, right? He's saying, well, because Paul says this, because he was a Pharisee and all of these things, that's to be counted as dung. Well, you being from the particular country you're from, the particular neighborhood you're from, particular town, region, everything, family that you're from, well, that's rubbish compared to knowing Jesus. And that's true in like a spiritual sense. Obviously, that's true, right? In the spiritual sense, of course, that's
Well, that's
true.
why I don't. Yeah, that's why I don't understand what he's
This
saying.
this is a confusion of categories.
Well, it's not just a confusion of categories, but it's also a massive straw man. It's a cheat.
Yeah,
It's cheap and it's cheating, and it's not arguing good faith,
yeah,
right? Because if he was arguing good faith, he would recognize the fact that nobody disagrees with this. This is not
yeah,
controversial. This is not him holding the line against us.
yeah,
Everyone agrees with this. In
yeah,
fact, I think Stephen is explicit about it in his book.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think you're right too. So continuing on, moreover, passages like Galatians 3:28, there it is. Ephesians 2:11-22, right? And just going back to Galatians 3:28 for just a second, right? When people use it, right, where they say, well, there's neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, male or female, we're all one in Christ, right? Then if you're using it in that way, you have to support transgenderism, right, and feminism and everything else.
well,
So that's how libs use it, right?
yes,
Well, we're all one in Christ. None of those things matter.
yes. Yeah, that's I mean, that's what I said last time is it's the
Yeah,
view that grace exists to conquer nature, right?
yeah,
And that's the Anabaptist view.
yeah, precisely. Ephesians 2:11-22, a similar issue, insists that we are all one in Christ, not in the sense that our ethnic identities do not exist, but in the sense that we are united to Christ to a degree that radically relativizes our ethnic differences or even our familial relationships. Matthew 12:40 and 45 or 50. Um, and again, right, going back to that analogy, right, you're a German Christian, singing the illegal song in Germany. Uh, would you be allowed to sing that according to Neil? Would you be sinning, right, against God, if you sing that song? And reading this, I think he would say that you are, because you were put at placing your ethnic identity over potentially other Christians, right, that don't belong in your country. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be the same thing here, right?
So
if
that's
you
what he means by that critique, is that it's wrong to have like relations that are not defined, or to prefer those relations, not those natural relations, especially in a political context.
yeah,
You're not allowed to do that. You have to
yeah,
treat everybody, you have to have preference for those that are united to you in Christ politically. That's what he's arguing.
I think so. I think so. And
Because
on top of that,
nobody actually thinks that I prefer my status as an Ingle above my status as a Christian. Like, nobody's arguing that. So he's actually saying, yeah, I didn't even think about that interpretation of what he's saying. So like
well,
any
yeah,
political arrangement where you prefer your people in like, let's say there's an African Christian, you can't
mhm.
behave, politically in a way that does not allow them into your
Well,
society.
or even just like the analogy would be, right? We had the debate last night. They talked about immigration and mass deportation and everything else, right? Say, right, like Neil goes to a big. I don't know how big JD Greer's church is. Maybe someone in the comments can enlighten us. But I think it's like thousands of people. So say they have somebody there that belongs to their church and is an illegal alien,
Mhm.
right? It's plausible that they could, right? And so, what's he saying here, right? With these things, you should not want mass deportations because you're placing your American identity over your over your brothers in Christ. That's what he's
Mhm.
saying,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Okay.
So I think that I think that's I don't think that's an unfair characterization of what he's saying.
Mhm.
So we'll keep going and see if I'm right. Um, so and this you feel free to comment on this, CJ.
But well,
Right?
by the way, this is exactly right. This is
This
exactly my
aside,
I say this all the time, that like they point out to this verse to justify their positions, but it literally says we're one in Christ. Like, can't mean the political
yeah,
society. It can't mean the general political order. It has to
yeah,
mean specifically those that are within the church. That's who's one within Christ.
yeah. When Paul is writing, right? I mean, he cites Galatians and Ephesians. He's writing to churches in Galatia and Ephesus, right into the various cities in Galatia. I mean, these are Greek cities, and the political order there is very well defined. I mean, both the Roman and the Greek political orders, right? Who is a Roman citizen? Who isn't? Right? You have right because Paul says, there's neither slave nor free, doesn't mean that the category of slave and freeman and plebe and patrician no longer existed and no longer mattered to a
Right.
society.
Right.
Right? It means it doesn't
100%.
matter in the church. It doesn't matter um, in terms of who belongs to Christ, right?
Correct. There's no
That's what it
hierarchy
matters.
in Christ. Yeah.
Yes, and so he's not saying that. Like Paul is not this like anarchist who wants to just overthrow the political order, right? He's not doing that. I mean, um, it's kind of controversial to bring up, but when it comes to the issue of ancient Roman slavery, Paul sent a runaway slave back. Right? There's a whole epistle in the New Testament about that. Right? That's gotten one of our friends in trouble talking about these things, but but uh, right, he's not overthrowing the political order. He is not doing a John Brown thing and saying, all right, part of this is we're gonna have this big slave revolt because there's not slavery anymore. Right? He wasn't doing that at
Mhm.
all. So anyway, and like the part in red here is really obnoxious. Right?
Red letter.
Aside on racism, feel free to skip if you already understand why racism is a sin. Right? If you already get it, right? Like he's implying, right? Oh, only these bad people, these terrible, horrible, awful people, right? They just don't understand why this word that was made up in the late 19th, early 20th century is, that nobody understood for 2000 years. Now we totally understand is sinful and bad, right? So 5 years ago, the unquestioned assumption of evangelicals, even strongly anti-woke evangelicals like James White or Vodi Bakum, was that racism is a grievous sin and a blight on the church. Okay. Unfortunately, that seems no longer to be the case among those on the woke right. Right? What is he citing here?
Yes.
Oh, another article. We're not going to read that. To be clear, this problem is not merely the result of the expansive redefinition of racism that has been adopted by the left. Even when I've criticized ethnic partiality, again, the preferred terminology of pastors like White and Bauckham, I've been asked why ethnic partiality is in fact a sin. What's wrong with loving your kin is the immediate rejoinder. For that reason, I'd like to give a brief explanation of why racism or ethnic partiality is a sin. Right, here's what he says. Yeah, Paul, self citation is a Chad move. Yeah, it's true. Props to him, man. Um, so this is all in bold too. Ethnic partiality is a sin because it is a species of partiality, which is repeatedly named in the Bible as a sin that is inconsistent with God's character. Right, Deuteronomy 1:17, 1 Timothy 5:21, James 2, Deuteronomy 10, Romans 2, Ephesians 6, Acts 10. Right. I mean, we could go into each one of those verses in terms and look
Yeah.
at the terms. Like some of them, like the Deuteronomy ones, is showing partiality based on someone's status or for whatever reason in terms of like the law, right? In terms of adjudicating that, like, no, the law applies to everyone equally, right?
Yes.
That's why partiality is bad, or God not being a respecter of persons, right? What does that mean? It means that God is totally free and sovereign and can do whatever he wants. He's not judging people based on their own inherent goodness or badness, right? That's what that means. Or James 2, right? Again, this is back to the church. This is right. You see a rich guy and you roll out the red carpet for him and you don't do anything for the poor guy coming into the church. That's bad. You shouldn't do that, right? You should love everyone equally in the church, right? But does that mean, right, if you're working for a company and you're doing sales, right, and you shouldn't show partiality in terms of, right, well, which guys should I call that are going to buy my things? Guys with a lot of money or guys without any money? Well, you'd be showing partiality if you call the guy with a lot of money first. So that's a sin, man. Right? It's this really slippery, shell game, really a Mott and Bailey of partiality means, like, this broad definition of what partiality is, and then saying, well, it's wrong to do any kind of discrimination whatsoever. It's wrong to differentiate between this thing and that thing and say, I like this thing better or that thing better, right? You're not allowed to do that if you're a Christian, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Isn't that what he's doing? I mean, am I
Well, he's
making
going to
sense here?
interact. He's going to interact with the ordered loves. So let's get into that.
Yeah, we will get to that. Yeah.
You got to put boundaries on it. I think everyone accepts that there has to be boundaries.
Right. The rejoinder here is not, again, yeah, he does give some nuance to it, some nuance. The rejoinder here is that not all preferences are condemned. After all, we shouldn't love our children more than the strangers' children or members of our local church more than people we've never met. Here, the racism skeptic will point to the Ordo Amoris, the right ordering of love described by St. Augustine in the City of God. The racism skeptic's argument runs roughly as follows. Right, God commands us to love all people, but also commands us to have special love to those nearest to us. This affection is not only good and natural, but is prescribed in the fifth commandment. It is assumed even in the hard teachings of Jesus. For example, Jesus' command to love him more than we love our father or mother or sisters or brothers is predicated on us having special love for our family, which is why he didn't say, love me more than you love strangers. The commands of Jesus are radical precisely because they ask us to expand our circle of concern. They don't assume such a circle doesn't exist at all. Throughout the Bible, we find commands to love and honor certain people above others, our parents, our children, our rulers, our pastors, our church, fellow believers, etc. None of these commands permits us to hate our neighbor, but all of them assume that rightly ordered loves will prioritize those with whom we have a special relationship. Once we establish that there is a natural and God-ordained hierarchy of loves, the principle of kin love follows. Our greatest duty is towards our immediate family. Then our duties expand outward to our extended family, our distant relatives, our clan, our own ethnic group, until only later reaching other ethnic groups. Loving other ethnic groups more than our own ethnic group would be as perverse as loving distant relatives more than we love our children. Therefore, what you call kinism or racism is actually a thoroughly biblical and God-ordained hierarchy of loves, right? So I don't even know who he's quoting, right? He doesn't. He
I think
doesn't.
that's his own write-up. Is that his own write-up?
Is it? Maybe it is. Maybe it's from the thing he cited earlier. I don't know, but there's no citation on this quote, right? But he says this argument is persuasive to some because many evangelicals and secular progressives, to an even greater degree, have lost any sense of the ordo moris. We sometimes talk as if we have sinned if we don't love distant strangers just as much, or perhaps even more than we love our children. This is not only infeasible. Can you actually love all 72 million inhabitants of Thailand? But
No.
contradicts the Bible's repeated injunctions that we should, in fact, show love to our own spouses and children and parents and fellow Christians more than we show to people we've never met. And he cites a few verses for that. Consequently, many evangelicals are not well prepared to answer the reasoning of the racism skeptic. That said, the major problem with the racism skeptic's argument is how it answers the question, and who is my neighbor? The very question the Pharisee posed to Jesus in Luke 10 in an attempt to justify himself. Jesus replied with the parable of the Good Samaritan, the story of an ethnic outsider and hated enemy of the Jews who shows love and compassion to a Jewish man who was robbed and beaten. Jesus' command to go and do likewise exposes the Pharisee and us in the most devastating way. The Pharisee wants to circumscribe the people whom he was commanded to love. Jesus would not allow it. Jesus' parable shows us how far we all fall short of the glory of God precisely because it refuses to limit the bounds of our neighbor love to our people. Right? So, comment on that. What do you think about this argument? Right? How he's framing the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, I mean, his argument, a lot of the Good Samaritan stuff rests upon like vicinity and immediacy and
Yeah.
context. I mean, there's a reason that the the Samaritan helped the person in trouble because he was right there among him. So like the idea that part of the order of love's equation or formula doesn't account for vicinity and only accounts for
Yeah.
race has never been actually argued anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So we all recognize the fact that there are people among us, and we shouldn't go within a broader circle to find people who are of the same genetic makeup as us and ignore those within our immediate community. That's never been the argument. I mean,
Yeah.
these are very political arguments, and yes, Jesus is certainly picking apart the Pharisees and their understanding of their religion for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so like these are the sort of like basic this entire thing is like a Jesus joke because it relies
Yeah.
on very basic Christian teachings in order to confront the woke right, which is not even arguing these things,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we
Well,
we've never felt challenged to comment on the Good Samaritan story because it's always been built into the way that we approach the world.
well, yeah, and not only that, but like I mean, think of the examples that that we used earlier, right? If you're a German in Germany and the Afghan or Algerian or whatever, right? Or in America, right? If you're walking down the road and you see lying in the ditch an illegal immigrant, right? An illegal from Honduras, and he's beaten and bloodied, and you're a guy and you got your Trump hat on, you're like, deport them all, get them all out of here, right? That guy, like, who's going to be the first one? I mean, this is the irony, of course, right? The chud in his Trump hat that's got the bumper sticker that says "send them all back," right? He finds that guy in the ditch. He's going to help him, right?
Mhm.
He's gonna help that guy,
Yes, correct.
right? Who's going to be the one that's like, I don't want to get near that. I'm not really sure. The like anti-racist, right? The like, oh, I don't know, like they're going to be the one doing that, right? The left-wing person, or even the squishy liberal, like like we're arguing against. They're like, I'm not really sure, but it'd be the chud that they would decry as racist. That's gonna be like, oh man, this person needs help.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, they're dying, right? I got to do something, right? No, that we wouldn't do that. If I saw somebody like the example of the Good Samaritan, who is an ethnic outsider. I'm not gonna be like, man, just let them die. I don't care, right? No, and part of that is that we've been our culture and our entire way of life has been discipled by the gospel for generation after generation, and it's just built into how we think and approach the world. And so part of that is just this understanding, right? I'll have sympathy for the person right in front of me and do something to help them, in a way that when I see the images of, oh, the crying children at the border, and we just need to, well, I guess we, forget having borders. We just need to let them all in because there were some kids crying down by the Rio Grande, right? Like that doesn't work on you if you have properly ordered loves,
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't, and it doesn't do anything to the fact that you might have people in your immediate vicinity, right, neighbors in the Good Samaritan parable sense, that if they've been harmed and they're dying, you should do the right thing and help them, right? Just
Yeah.
say, oh, it's illegal, we just let them die, right? No, nobody thinks that way, right? Not even like the most staunch, mass deportationist thinks that way. Yeah, you're right. It's just a Jesus juke. Is all it is. Oh, well, you can't have properly ordered loves because the parable of the Good
Well,
Samaritan.
yeah, exactly. And like these are meta socio-political, things at play. These are not like they get down to these like state of the exception all the time. Like, well, what
Yeah,
if there's a scenario and you're at a restaurant and this guy who is an illegal comes in and then he trips and falls and like breaks his knee. Are you allowed to help? You're just like, okay, God, like that's not what the conversation's
yeah,
about.
yeah. So therefore, oh, you're going to help him. So that means, I guess, you should be for, mass migration and demographic replacement,
That's what
right?
always happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's just silliness. So let's go on with this argument. The solution to the tension between loving our neighbor and loving those closest to you is to recognize, as the Samaritan traveled, he came to where the man was. Yes, in principle, we are to love all people everywhere, but your neighbor is not all people everywhere. Neither is your neighbor only people from your own ethnic group, right? No one's arguing that.
No.
So, argument invalid. Instead, your neighbor is anyone along your path, anyone you meet, anyone in front of you at the moment. In
Mhm.
the most concrete way possible, the principle not only undermines progressive notions of abstract universal love, it also undermines racist ways of abstractly loving your own. Right? And like this is just such a straw man. Right? It's like nobody that is arguing with the Ordo Amoris would be like, nope,
Well,
can't help the
here's
illegal.
here's the other thing. When we talk about loving our own, we're dealing in the realm of culture and transcendence. So
Yeah,
this is hilarious. This is the mistake of nominalism, where the only things that exist are individuals. But when we say that we love our
that's funny.
heritage and we love our way of life, when we say we love our own, we're actually loving something that's broader than the individuals that make it up.
Yeah,
So this is one of the big mistakes of like this is what people like Neil who make these arguments against us because they're attributing these things to us. They don't recognize the fact that we don't think in terms of the individual. When I
yeah,
think of myself as belonging to a people, the people is not just the constitutive individuals that make it up. It's actually something broader than that. Individuals are derived from the capital P people, and that's
yeah.
what we have fealty to. We
Hmm.
have fealty to something metaphysical, something that exists above the individuals. And that's
Yeah,
like when I talk about heritage and culture, this is not just a collection of individuals. It's actually a thing in and of itself because I'm not a nominalist. And I think that's a very
yes,
important element at play because I don't think a lot of them think about it. That's why they have these exceptions and these like unique situations in order to demonstrate their point. But no, I'm committed to Heritage America as a concept. That's a thing that exists beyond just individual white people. You know what I mean? Like there's something
yeah.
more there than just that.
Well, and yeah, and just using this analogy and using this argument, the way that he's using it, right? Well, here's the thing, right? When we're talking about and so Tuttle's comment here at separation of church and state bros seem most ready to contort neighbor love teaching to apply it to state action,
Turtle
right? And so
gets it.
it's
This is
confusion.
what I've been
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, it's a confusion of the two things. And so think about it this way, right? Neil is at least half Indian, maybe more. I don't know what exactly his heritage is. I know he has some South Asian descent, and I mean, think about the community he's in, and he's in America, right? He's in the United States of America, right? He has neighbors um, and a community that's made up of heritage Americans, and the American regime is actively dispossessing those people from their country, right? They're importing
Yeah.
tens of millions of people from the third world, not only illegally but also legally, right? People that are Neil's ethnic kin, right, to America. Millions of South Asians, Indians, coming to America, right? So if he's going to practice neighbor love, right, practice love of those closest to him, which transcends ethnic love, which he's arguing, right, then he should oppose the he should oppose what Trump said, right, stapling a green card to the back of college diplomas when whatever Indian guy comes and gets a computer programming degree or whatever. He should be like, no, this is actually bad for Americans. This is bad for these people who I love that are my neighbors. We should stop it. Right? That would be radical neighbor love to do such a thing. And it would transcend ethnic loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
It would be love of the people that are around you, of your
Yeah.
actual neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? That's
that's a good
that's
point.
the point. Right? And instead, right, he wants to say that people who oppose mass demographic replacement, that see, one, that recognize that it's happening, and two, think it's bad, that they're just racist, right? They're just motivated by this sinful ethnic partiality. They just care about white people, and it's like, no, I care about America. I care about the country that I inherited when I was born, right? That's what I care about.
Yeah.
No, that's nuts. So anyway, yeah. So thank you, Trottle, for the comment. And the where we leave off. Let's see.
The biggest
Yes,
problem.
the biggest problem with racism is not the fact that you love your own, but the fact that you fail to love your neighbor. Yeah, so apply that to the analogy I just made, right? Opposing, not opposing mass demographic replacement of heritage Americans, or even in the West of the British, of the French, of the Germans. Not opposing that is to not love your neighbors, right? The people immediately near you. Racists justify their ethnic partiality by constructing a completely abstract hierarchy in the name of rightly ordered loves. But if they fail to love the actual neighbor right in front of them, that failure, ironically, reveals deeply disordered loves. Right? Yeah,
one of the
that's what we're
problems.
talking about. Right?
Well,
That's what we're doing.
This always Turtle. I mean, touched on this already, but this always comes up. They'll take something in Christianity, and then they'll throw it into political decision making, and it suddenly becomes theonomy from the left. Like all of a sudden, like it's like the Beatitudes are suddenly, you can't have the 10 Commandments, but you can have the Beatitudes, and they're placed into law, and therefore, as the meeting of, because we're supposed to love our neighbor, we have to invite the world. And so like all of these things become this like evangelical Christianized justification of left-wing political causes.
Yeah.
And so this happens all the time. And it's really irritating to me how they are constantly imputing political decisions with Christianity and the teachings of Christ at a private level. So whenever we're taught to love our neighbor, suddenly that becomes a political imperative, and suddenly the function of state is to restructure society so that they can say they're loving their neighbor, right? And then suddenly the state becomes a revolutionary institution.
Yeah, I agree. So here we go. Let's go with the next paragraph. A practical illustration. I'm going to do one of my own once we're finished with this one. A practical illustration will be helpful here. Imagine a white Christian whose church calls a new pastor who happens to be black. The new pastor is orthodox, godly, and humble. But the white man leaves the church because he feels more comfortable with his own people and defends his actions on the grounds that he is just loving his kin. In fact, the man is sinning because his loves are disordered. He loves abstract white people whom he has never met more than he loves the pastor of his own church, a member of his spiritual family, whom he is specifically commanded to honor and submit to. So that's, well, yeah. Okay. let's flip that analogy around, right?
It's
You got a black,
tolerant.
you got a black church, right? You got a black church, and somehow, for whatever reason, right, they call a white pastor, right? Imagine this happening, right? Somewhere in a big city or down south, right? You got, an African Methodist Episcopal church, and they call Bishop, John Smith to come be the pastor of the church, and it's a white guy, right? Do you think some people will leave for that reason? Do you think that would cause some problems, right? I think they would, or if it's a Korean or Chinese PCA church, right, which exist, right? Say they called a white pastor, and he didn't know anything about Korean culture or Chinese culture, doesn't speak the language. Do you think people would say, you know what, I'm gonna go um I'm gonna go to a different Chinese church or a different Korean church, right? People would say that, right? Would they get the same level of condemnation from someone like Neil as here? Would
I
they?
don't think so.
I don't think so at all. No.
No.
Um, not one
But
bit.
now here's the thing. The reason they did that was not because they don't like the color, the shade of skin, right?
No.
It's because as human beings, we're deeper than our skin color.
Yeah.
And these like when it comes to culture, which includes things like norms and customs and liturgical formula and language,
Mhm.
it includes worship styles and dress and mode of functions and all that stuff, titles, labels, like everything that can't even be described in words. That's what a human is. It's all of those things. It's all of the preference scales having to do with how their soul is ordered to be attracted to certain things. And so
Mhm.
we are not just, we are not just like automatized individuals. We're not just
Yeah.
atomized individuals. So like these scenarios are so ridiculous because they assume that there are a group of people out there that literally don't like someone because of the color of their skin.
Yeah. The shade. What's their shade, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, the reason why the black
But no,
church or the,
people are
the
way
Korean
deeper.
church or the Chinese church would do that is they would say this person's not one of us. He doesn't understand us,
Mhm.
right? That would be their reasoning for it. And this guy in his thought experiment, right? Why is he objecting? Right. So I just don't like black people. Is that what he's saying? Or what's his rationale? He's like, well, I don't think
Well,
he
that's what
really
he's
gets
saying.
the
If that
yeah,
happened and someone said, "I don't like black people," but that
yeah,
rarely happens.
yeah,
It does happen. Okay, that's
yeah,
fine. Um, in the same sense that like I don't know, it's ridiculous to come up with these scenarios, these
yeah.
gotcha scenarios. But is
I
he
know.
actually
Yeah,
making an argument against the woke right? Because
yeah. None of
none of
us
us
are like, yeah, that's a valid reason for leaving,
yeah,
right?
none
We're
of
not.
us. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the definition of a straw man.
yeah. It's just no one is making this argument that we think, yeah, that's
Right.
fine. You should do that. Like if I'm attending a church and they call Voti Bakum, right? Well, I'm not a Baptist, but say I was a Baptist, right? And they call Voti Bakum. I'd be like, I can't go here now, right? This guy's black. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, right? No, nobody's gonna say that. It's like, oh man, if it would be awful if we had 9 Clarence Thomases on the Supreme Court because he's a black guy, right? Nobody's saying that. That's just ridiculous. So anyway, continuing on, let's keep burning up these strawmen. The problem is particularly acute in our society. We can speculate all we want about an ideal ethno state. Who is speculating about that outside of Israel? Who's right, who's speculating about an ideal ethno state?
People like Neil
Uh,
spend more time thinking about an ethno state than we do.
yeah, I that's not a thing I think about very often. You're like, okay, an ideal ethno state composed of nothing but our own group. However, the vast majority of people in the United States live with, work with, interact with, attend church with people of many different ethnic groups. Therefore, if you disobey Jesus' command to love your actual neighbor by speculating about how he would not be your neighbor at all in your imaginary ideal society, you're making precisely the same mistake the Pharisee made with the precisely same motivation. Here again, this is why I say, right, he would say the Germans singing Auslander Raus would be sinning, right? Or to bring it to an American context, the guy who says we need to have 40 million people deported tomorrow is sinning because, right? Well, these are your neighbors, man. You can't do that. Or maybe I'll put some words in CJ's mouth, right? We need to revoke the green cards of all the H-1B, Chinese and Indians, right? Well, you're sinning if you do that. That's a sin. You're creating an ideal society, and that's no state. You're trying to devise it. That's no state, man.
Yeah. So the concept of the by the way, I don't know what this guy's saying about the energy, whatever.
I'm low energy, man. I'm low energy. Low energy Jeb Bush.
I'm falling asleep reading this article. But so Neil, like people like Neil, they always have this critiquing our imaginary ideal society. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to overstate like how particularistic we are. Like everything having to do with politics for me is all about contextuality and situationalism. Like I am like the Mr. Particularity. There's no ideal society in my head. Anything I do politically has to do with real dynamics at play. And in fact, you know what critical analysis of power is? It's realism. It is not idealism at all. The only idealists in the room are the classical liberals. They're the liberals.
Yes. I mean, just think of it in terms of like foreign policy, right? People are not that know what's going on. They're realists, right? They have a realist foreign policy. They're not. We need to make the world safe for democracy.
These guys are against deportation on the grounds that like we can work with, like they're like, and then they operate idealistically about what they can do to help these people integrate into society. It's like, no, you can't do it. Like, sorry to be the realist here. Sorry to rain on your idealist parade, but you're not going to be able to do it. These people have to go. And that's the blunt answer to the problems that ail us.
No, CJ, I've been reliably informed that the 100,000 Somalis in the Twin Cities, they're on the magic dirt, and they're immediately like they've studied how many U.S. senators we have, and they've prepared for the test, and they've taken the test, and they're citizens now, and so they're Americans, just as American as you or me. Right? Ilhan Omar's just as American as you and me, and they have all the same rights. They have the same. They're assimilating. They're becoming part of the fabric of America. Right? What are you talking about?
The cultural consequences of idealism are going to require some insane particularity that nobody wants. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Like liberal idealism is a disease, and the further along it grows and festers, the more it's going to take realism and a critical analysis of society to actually come up with solutions that correlate with the problems.
Yeah, I know. So let's continue on right there. You might as well tell Jesus that you won't honor your actual parents because in the imaginary family you invented in your mind, you were the child of Chuck Norris and Wonder Woman. Right? Like this is just ridiculous. Like no one, like you're saying, right? You are the idealist, creating the fictional society where we can just take everybody on planet Earth and just throw them into America and they all become Americans. Isn't that so great? Right? No, this is
your imaginary. Who's imaginary family? This is like the Ben Affleck needing to go outside for a smoke right now.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I need to re-up here. So in summary, racism or ethnic partiality can be defined as showing partiality toward your ethnic group such that you violate the second greatest commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. Given that Jesus explains the command to love your neighbor as yourself in terms of treating others the way you want to be treated, a simple test of ethnic partiality is this: would you want your neighbor to treat you the way that you treat him? In other words, would you want him to give the job to a less qualified candidate who shared his ethnicity? Would you want him to ignore you when you visited his church? Would you want him to ascribe negative stereotypes to you because of your ethnicity? Right? If I were in someone's country and living off the public largesse, right? Living off the hard work of other people. I would want them to kick me out, right? If I'm going to a place and I'm been brought there by an evil, sick, twisted regime that says we hate all these stupid people in the middle of the country, we want you here to replace them, right? I would want them to kick me out, right? That's what I would want because I don't
Yeah.
belong there,
Here's
right?
okay.
That's what I would want. That's the golden
Here's
rule for you.
here's another angle. I wouldn't want them to kick me out because politics is about friend enemy distinction. And
That's a good angle. Yeah.
in politics, you have to recognize the fact that treating others as you want to be treated is a recipe for cultural liquidation because your
Yeah.
enemies don't care about your principles. They don't care about your way of life.
No.
If we were in a conflict, like let's say during the Cold War, and we were dealing with the Soviets, and we're like,
Mhm.
if I was in the Soviet shoes, how would I want to be treated? And
Yeah.
you operated
Yeah.
your political policy like that, you know what would have happened? Communism would have taken over the West.
You
So
lose. Yeah.
yeah, but so the reality, not to get bogged down in political ideology like the liberals do. The reality of the situation is that politics is about friends and enemies, and it's up to a political actor to make decisions that are hurtful toward those on the
Yeah.
receiving end of it.
Yeah.
Like
And even
nobody's
yeah.
claiming that pushing out criminals from society back into the society is something that the criminals want, that the immigrants, the
Yeah.
illegals want.
Yeah.
No,
Do
they
they
don't
want to
want
be
that.
treated that way? Yeah.
But there is a
Yeah.
friend enemy distinction at play. And I
Yeah.
think and I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, even digging into some of these questions and the way they're framed and everything else. Uh, right. Would you want to give the job to a less qualified candidate who shared his ethnicity? Right. Like nobody wants to do that. Like nobody on the right is saying, we want to just have jobs and we only want to hire white people. And we don't care if the white guy is an idiot and incompetent. And we're going to hire him because he's white. Right.
Well,
What do we want? What?
yeah.
No, really. What do we want? We want to be able to say, no, we don't have to be mandated to hire people that are not competent just because of their
Yes,
particular
yes.
race.
Right.
Right. That's what we want the Civil Rights Act gone. Right. We
Yes.
want the best candidates to be able to go to college regardless of their race. We want, all of these things, right? All the affirmative action stuff needs to go, right? That's so the woke right. What do we want? We don't want that, right? The so-called woke right. We don't want that, right? We're not arguing for that. Nobody is. Another straw man, right? We're saying just let us practice freedom of association, right? Don't mandate us uh, to have to hire people that are not competent.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want any didn't earn it employees. Right. And that's the thing too. Like, I mean, the other thing, like, ignore them when you visited your church. Like, nobody's doing that. Nobody's suggesting that. Or ascribe negative stereotypes because of your ethnicity. I mean, even that one, right? Who does that happen to more than anybody? Right? Is it publicly acceptable to talk about negative stereotypes of ethnicity? It's white people constantly,
Yes.
right? You're allowed to do that. We can tell all the jokes we want right now about white people, how dumb white people are, and how how they can't dance and stuff like that. we can talk about all that all day long, right? And how evil and racist they are. But he's saying we want to be just like them, right? We want to just be like the left and be able to be nasty to people on account of their skin color.
Because of the woke center.
Yeah, exactly. I hope it goes without saying that using racial slurs or even intentionally saying things that will needlessly offend others is sinful because it violates God's commands regarding our speech. End of aside on racism. Right. So now we can get into the conclusion. We talked a little bit. We got into this about your fun tweets about rap music. Right. You had
Which, by the way,
North Korea. Yeah.
yeah, what is it, Kim Un Jong or whatever his name is?
Kim Jong Un. Right. The
Okay.
great leader.
Yeah. So he's been following Neil's blog. He saw the tweets about rap and decided to take action. So
yeah, I mean, for them, the cultural contagion is K-pop, but same difference.
yeah, well, yeah, it's particularity. You have to
Yeah,
apply these rules
that's
to your
right.
own situation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, going back to it, like just the Neil freaking out over this stuff. It's it
It's
it
good.
is
It
it's sad.
warms my heart. It makes me, my content is worth writing, and I'm gonna get more into the rap space, the anti-rap space, excuse me. Where are
Yes.
you at?
So I'm
Let's keep going. It's already
to
been an
E.
hour.
Let's get to E so we can just
Yeah,
tie a
I wanna
bow
eat
on this.
tonight.
Finally, E, godless speech and behavior. Right. Finally, anyone who spent time online has probably noticed a pattern of reprehensible behavior from the woke right. The woke right's social media posts are suffused with scorn, ridicule, mockery, and sneering, which qualify as unwholesome talk and are therefore sinful, especially when they're directed toward fellow believers. Yet many on the woke right exult in calling other Christians, conservative evangelical Christians, for what it's worth, uh, fake and uh, losers, trash, garbage, limp wristed, the F word. Can't say it here on YouTube. I'd like to be able to say that such comments are only made by laser-eyed anons with names like Chad the Based Groiper 17, but unfortunately, major accounts gleefully participate in this behavior too. If that's you, remember, you will give an account of every careless word uttered. Repent and receive forgiveness. Right? Yeah, I can't call anyone limp wristed, even when they're being limp wristed.
That's
Right? Not
crazy.
not allowed. You can't say.
It's like, yeah, the new legalism is interesting because it's kind
Mhm,
of a recent phenomenon. Like, you don't really see this aspect of like behavioral, like precise behavioral policing very much in the
mhm.
Reformed tradition. So I think this is pretty much a 20th century phenomenon that like every phrase has to be like approved, like that's
Yeah.
very much a modern approach. It's very managerial for sure.
Oh yes.
I think it's a
Yeah.
product of the administrative state. Um, but yeah, like things like even things like calling people garbage or limp wristed. I mean, like we could point out that like there's a well established tradition in the Western Christianity, like Martin Luther and stuff like that. But it's really new to have these very precise phrases come
Mhm,
under the microscope, and so that every single one of our like polemical decisions have to be deconstructed. So it's really weird to deal with it. Like just growing up, I think you agree with me. Like the way that our entire culture would speak about things was very relaxed and jovial. Like I think of my
mhm,
parents, right? My
mhm,
grandparents, excuse me, my in-laws. One of them is German and one of them is Italian. Like they're each 100%. And the way that they make fun of each other is amusing and hilarious. And I think that used to be
mhm,
the norm. Like it
mhm,
was fun to get online and we could dunk on Canadians. That's a good American pastime. But
mhm.
now everything we do is like called into question and put under this like moral preening microscope. And it's really, I don't even really know how to deal with it except for just to ignore it.
Yeah, I guess maybe Neil had a bad experience playing Call of Duty from like 2009 to 2013. Uh, but
Like,
anyway, yeah,
spend some time in like sports, like with other guys in
in
high school.
sports or man, like if you've done blue collar work before
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
and how guys talk, right? And oftentimes, yeah, it's not
Yeah,
edifying,
it's
it's not
crass.
Christian. They're
Yeah,
crass people,
yeah.
but
This is
that's how
another
people are.
Yeah, but who did Jesus go to again?
Yeah,
Like he went to fishermen. You think
yeah.
how do you think the fisherman's language was?
Commercial fishermen, right? Have you
Yeah.
ever been? I've been around commercial fishermen. Have you ever been around commercial fishermen,
Yes.
right? Or have
Yes.
you ever watched The Deadliest Catch, right? Those were Jesus' disciples,
Yeah,
right?
they were
Like
the cornerstone of the yeah,
cigarette hanging out of his lip the whole time, right?
yeah, they
Those
provided the
guys,
foundation for the church.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, he needs
I
to he
Let me
needs
just say
to
this
leave
too,
home and get some start laying some
like,
sheetrock.
Paul here, I completely believe you. Like I know you and I believe you.
Yeah, yeah, that's the great thing about being an American is, they're not putting us in jail yet for those things. So, the
Well,
last couple paragraphs.
I just believe him that he does that.
Oh, yeah, 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 exactly. Um,
Yeah.
so even among those who frown on these actions, there's an unwillingness to break ranks or even to admit that a problem exists because of their adherence to the principle of no enemies to the right. Briefly, Netter insists that the left is such a tremendous threat to the very existence of America that those on the right should never publicly critique others on the right, even if they offer private criticism. I've argued elsewhere, we're not going to read that, that this strategy is biblically impermissible. Right. Here's the thing. Right. When you're at war, and this is just my defensive net briefly. Right. You're at war, and you're in a squad. You're in a platoon, in an infantry platoon.
Yep.
Right. You're not going to think, all right, is this dude over here, right next to my side, who's firing at the enemy? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Right? Is he somebody that
Yeah.
that I want my kids to be around?
Right.
Right. He's not, right. He says bad things. He says bad words. He's mean and rude. I guess I should shoot him. Right. That's like rhetorically, that's what we're in. Like conflict with the left is war. And you don't shoot at people on your own side, right? It doesn't mean you promote the guy to general and put him in charge of the war. But it also doesn't mean you fire on your own people when you are at war fighting an enemy.
Well, it's
Right.
also like it's a waste of time. Like,
Yeah,
so I mean, I disagree with a ton of people on the right on a variety of different things.
of course.
Um, but like, why would I expend like precious bandwidth on like undermining whatever they're doing? It would just be a
Yeah.
distraction.
Well, because
Um,
that's the other thing. It's like the enemy on the other side is saying, hey, that guy in the foxhole next to you, he's a bad guy. He's really, really bad. You should shoot at him. Right. Okay, I will. Right. You're that's what they want. Right. They want infighting among various groups.
and there's a lot
It's
of people on the right that are worth ignoring. You don't have to pretend like
yeah,
everybody's like my confidant, and it's or whatever. It's just like, look, okay, it's a waste of my time. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So that's what netter
So
just means that you're not going to expend precious bandwidth on political bandwidth, right? Like
yeah,
you can like if someone joined our conversation right now and that we
yeah.
disagree with them totally on something, like we could have a fun argument and I would push back
Mhm,
on them, but I'm not going to
mhm.
go report him and dox him. You know what I mean? That's what it's
Yeah,
about.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. However, my bigger concern is that a commitment to Netter will dull people's consciences. I've been personally grieved by the trajectory of some of my friends. Um, that's kind of a white pill buried in there.
Well,
that,
yeah.
some of his friends are becoming right wing, and he's grieved by it. Indeed, I'm certain that if their 2022 selves could see what they're now comfortable with, they too would be horrified. Well, yeah, like think about if we went back to our anarcho-capitalist selves, right? We get in our DeLorean and we say, "Hey, Andrew. Hey, CJ. Stop talking about the nap for 1 second. We got to tell you about the future, right? We're coming from the future and telling you what it's like. And here's the things you're going to see and what you're going to discover." Um, I don't think my 2013 self would freak out about that about me right now, right? Because I'm the same guy. I'm adjusting and adapting to political realities that I'm understanding and getting a better understanding of, right?
That's what it
And
means to grow.
that's
Yeah.
what I've always done, right? When I became libertarian and like this free market guy and was dabbling in theonomy and anarcho capitalism and all those things, right? That was a rejection of right the neoconservative con Inc. Way of thinking that I'd grown up with as well. Because I had grown, I had seen, oh, this is bad. Right, the Iraq War, that's really bad. That's a
Mhm.
problem. And here's this guy Ron Paul talking about it, and it's like, whoa, I had no idea. And now I understand things I didn't understand before. It's like, guess what, Andrew? In 10 years, you're going to understand a lot more stuff that you didn't understand before. And so, like, 10 years from now, am I going to have different opinions than I have now? Maybe I will. I just look at it as a normal trajectory where I've just developed my understanding and my way of thinking about the world, and I'm sure the same way. Um, so that argument always is just funny to me. Oh, if you would see yourself, you know, 6 years ago, they would be horrified by what you've become. Like, who cares?
I'm gonna mute myself for a second.
What's that?
Oh, why don't you read the next paragraph? I got to
All
mute
right.
myself.
All right. Sadly, we witnessed the same dynamics in 2018 on the woke left. Rather than exposing the problems in their midst, woke evangelicals were so confident in the righteousness of their cause that they circled the wagons, put fingers in their ears, and accused critics of being racist. Today, we're watching the woke right follow the same path, circling the wagons, putting their fingers in their ears, and accusing their critics of being fake and progressives. If you refuse to learn from the mistakes of the left, you will repeat them. I mean, this is just absurd. Putting our fingers in our ears. It's recognizing the reality that you're in conflict with an enemy, with an existential threat to your way of life, and you need to actually fight, right? You need to actually fight them, and yes, that means having allies. That means having friends that fight alongside you that you're not going to criticize. That means not caring about the condemnation of people like Neil. It means, right, you're the people that attack. When Owen Strahan attacks me or attacks you or attacks our friends, right? You fight back. You point out this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, like the tweet today that he sent out about Joel Webbon, right? You saw that, right? From
No, I
Owen.
was so busy today. What happened?
He's on this kick about Joel because Right Wing Watch said, quoted something Joel said at the conference in Ogden
Was this
about
about
crushing
enemies?
your
Okay,
enemies.
God, I
And
hate this. This ticks me off. I hate this subject. So here's the thing. What is a political actor supposed to do?
supposed to just tap the enemies on the head and just pat them
I
gently.
do not understand this. This is so basic to like anybody who's taking like government in 5th grade, or like Romans 13. That's the point of politics, is to crush enemies. And
Yeah.
yes, if you don't have good people in politics, you're going to have definition of enemies that are not actually, in the best interest of the society. So that's why you need good people in politics, because people who act on your behalf are going to define enemies in the same way you do. But yeah, that's what politics is. It's about crushing your enemies. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't. That's the most basic, like strained vision, like meaning, function
Do you know
of
what
Paul.
his tweet was? I'll tell you about it. He cited the Bible in why Joel was wrong.
Yep.
Right? Because Jesus says in Matthew 5 to love your enemies. So you can't crush your enemies if you are
That's
commanded to love them.
So I looked up Anabaptist view of politics, and all they did is showed Neil's tweet.
Or Owens, yeah.
It was okay. That's
it was Owen. It wasn't Neil, but it was Owen, and it's like
that makes sense because yeah, Owen is not that bright on this kind of stuff, and I'm trying to be nice, but like this is basic stuff, man. Romans 13. This is the role of the state. Like Jesus juking, Anabaptist Jesus juking has been debunked.
Yeah, it is. So summary, the very end. In this article, I've argued that the woke right is a reasonable label for an actual movement that has embraced the same ideas as the woke left. No, you have not demonstrated that. We're not reading Foucault, right? We're not reading Habermas. We're not adopting capital C critical theory.
Well,
Right? That's not what we're doing.
We should do a discussion on critical theory, because I know we should talk about that sometime. Maybe have Paul on. But it's interesting that he refers to this as an actual movement, because what I see myself is carrying on a great tradition that's been around for thousands of years. That's what I see myself as doing. That's what I consider to be the illiberal right, the right that opposes liberalism, is what he describes as the woke right, because he's never recognized that there is this tradition. It's not this 20th century phenomenon that's derivative of critical theory. It's actually a traditional view of politics. And for the first time, we're rediscovering it, because the whole idea of American liberalism in the 20th century was to sever ourselves from historical political theory.
Yeah. Both historical political theory and historical way of life. I mean, the two in tandem.
Correct.
And so continuing on.
We're gonna race through this, Andrew, because
we're almost I know I got to get going too. I've then argued that these ideas should be rejected by Christians for precisely the same reasons that we reject them when they're championed by progressives, right? Well, they're not the same ideas at all, period. We've demonstrated that. You can watch the episodes. That said, the labels we use are far less important than the actual ideas involved. If people find the label woke right unhelpful or confusing, it's fine to substitute another term like dissident right or new right. That's fine. So this doesn't really even matter then, Neil. The terminology doesn't, right? The thing that's in his craw is that there's an actual right wing
Yeah.
among Christians
I
that
prefer
exists.
old right. I prefer old right
Yeah.
to new right.
Yeah.
Because I prefer the right that goes back to the French Revolution.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Yeah, that oppose the French Revolution.
I'm a counter-revolutionary.
Yes.
Sue me.
Same. Deal with it. Two final thoughts. So he gives the horseshoe theory, right? A little infographic of it. Two final thoughts. To those who complain about the political threat of the woke right is negligible, I agree. Although the situation may change, the woke right is a tiny marginal movement. That's true. There's not a lot of us. Yes. In contrast, the left-wing wokeness is a dominant ideology in nearly every area of society: politics, media, education, business, sport, even religion. Yet, even when combating left-wing wokeness, my primary concerns have never been political. They've always been spiritual. That is the problem.
Yep,
right there.
Right there. That's everything. That's everything. That's everything. You're using ecclesiological categories to critique the political society.
Yes.
That's it. That's the.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't read the whole article, but I'm gonna highlight this next time.
Learn to think politically, as politics as a Christian.
It's like it's like this is always so funny because they'll take this is basically like a left-wing version of like theonomy. Well, they'll take spiritual categories like this. This is Anabaptist. This is typical Anabaptist. They'll take spiritual categories, categories related to the dispensation of grace, the new covenant, and they'll apply it to all of political society. So that things like one in Christ actually refers to the political order, and that we can't make distinctions in the political order because we're all one in Christ. This is a very common mistake. And so, yes, I think Neil has done a great job at pinpointing his own Achilles heel.
I agree. Woke ideas are false and corrosive to the Christian worldview. Fact check, true.
So true.
They will poison the spiritual health of the church and the spiritual life of the individual. And the reason why that's true is because they're false, because they're lies, because they're destroying what is good and true and beautiful. What we want to do is build up what is true and good and beautiful. And the liberal, like Neil, says, we're just kind of neutral toward the true and good and beautiful, right? You can build it up if you want or not, right? It's your choice, right? That's the problem, right? That is the problem here. They will poison the spiritual health, right? They'll poison the spiritual health of the church and the spiritual life of the individual, right? Yes, because they're corrosive, because they're not true. They're lies. Therefore, it doesn't matter which version of wokeness poses a greater political threat. They should both be rejected on theological grounds. False. That is false, right? Because the right wing, right, rightism, right-wing political thought is grounded in reality. It's grounded in the order of how God created the world. Right? That's what it's grounded in. And so it's true. Therefore, it's not a threat to the church whatsoever. Period. Right? It shouldn't be rejected. And on theological grounds.
It is a major threat to the Summit Church and to regime evangelicalism.
Oh yeah, huge threat to them. Right? It's a theological threat to acceptable regime-approved Christianity. Right? Because they have conformed themselves to the liberal order. And now they're at a crossroads. Do we conform to the far left, right, post-liberal order, that's left-wing, or do we stand against it? Right? That's the issue right now, today. Right? That's what the problem is. Right? So finally, to those who are sick of left-wing wokeness, are frustrated by many evangelicals' capitulation to it, and are casting about for some solution, any solution, to the problems we're facing as a culture, please be careful. Do not let your frustration blind you to the serious problems on your team. Right? Here's the other problem, and this is this I hypocrite is joining us. Well, is it a sin? Right? Is it a sin to be right wing, CJ?
No.
No. Not only that, I would submit it's a sin to not be right wing
Ooh,
if you're a Christian.
counterpoint.
Yeah, that's my counterpoint. It's wrong. Like, if not a sin, you're at least in very serious error. Right? That's what I would say. It's good. I'm glad to give you some relief, hypocrite. But right, this is a problem though. He is count there when Neil and the James Lindsay wannabes within evangelicalism who are fighting wokeness, right? They do a good job talking about CRT and all the problems with it and everything else, right? The problem with them is they're liberals, right? They want to replace something with nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want to have a society that is totally neutral, right? That isn't grounded in any particular tradition or way of life, and reinforcing that and built all around it, right? They want just a liberal society where everybody can just they're individuals, they can choose whatever they want, and this is so nice, right? That's what they want to go back to, and that doesn't work. It's the failures of liberalism that have led to wokeness,
Mm-hmm.
right? That have allowed it to take over. And so they're in order to defeat wokeness, you have to fight something with something. You have to have a positive vision. Aaron Wrenn had a guest writer this week. Benjamin Mabry, I think, was the writer. Did you read his article, CJ?
No.
You should. And it was basically against the antis. He brings up Neil Shenvi. Right, they're fighting all of these things, but they don't have anything to replace it. They don't have any positive vision for what a nation should be, what a society should be, what a culture should be. Right? It's an anti-vision. It's just secularism, but nice, right? That's what they have to offer, and it you should see this by now. Like when he says this, be careful. Do not let your frustration blind you to the serious problems on your team. Right? Don't look for these right wing guys to come in and solve all the problems. Tell you to go vote for Donald Trump, who's going to deport all the illegals. Right? Don't capitulate to that. Don't give up. Right? Be a good liberal like me. Right? In 2020, here, we'll finish it out. There's only a couple lines left. In 2020, after years of hitting a brick wall when I tried to convince evangelicals that critical theory was a serious threat to the church, I urged woke sympathetic Christians to identify a woke theology breaking point, to draw a line in the sand that would convince them that a real problem existed. This year, I offer the same admonition to dissident sympathetic Christians. Right? Christians also need to identify a dissident right breaking point by asking similar questions. How much racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism do you need to see in your group chat before you leave? How often do white nationalists have to like your tweets before you start wondering why you're attracting them? Right? How many Orthodox theologians whom you admire have to raise such concerns before you'll listen to them? Right. So I'll ask you the same thing, CJ. Right? Are you worried about racism, misogyny, and anti-Semitism in your group chats?
No.
You're worried that you're going to see too much of it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, this is the thing: is what is happening here, and this
Well,
is why. Yeah, go ahead.
it's like what happens is they'll take words that they're scare words. They're Richard
Mm-hmm.
Weaver called them devil words like racism and
Mm-hmm.
misogyny and anti-Semitism. And like everyone knows that those are like the worst things you can be. And then they'll label everything that you interact with as those things. And therefore, since you're always involved in them, therefore you've been completely desensitized to racism. It's a complete debating trick.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cheap shot, and it actually therefore renders your argument kind of null and void, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Well.
not really a fair way of dealing with things. I don't know what white nationalism means. Like
Yeah.
these are the completely undefined phrases that you have to throw at us. So no, I'm
Yeah.
not concerned because I know my own limits, and I have things there are things on the right wing that I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
But because Neil's someone that's willing to apply these devil words to everybody in my circles, they therefore mean nothing, and I therefore don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, and my thinking about this as well is, right, you live in a world today that lies to you about everything that has to do with race. It lies to you about everything that has to do with male female relations and feminism and so forth. It lies to you about a place called Israel and a group of people in our country, that certain ethnic religious group lies to you about them all the time. And so when you have young men, usually men, not only, begin to see these lies, right, they jump in the deep end, and right, they might imbibe some things they shouldn't, but they're trying to figure out what the truth is, right? There, and guys like Neil will say that guy's a racist, he's a misogynist, he's an anti-Semite, right? When they're trying to figure out what is true. I want to know. I'm a Christian. I want to know what the truth is. I want to know
Mhm.
what the true things are. Oh, well, you can't consider that because that's bad, right? You can't think about that idea because that's bad. You're not allowed to think about things like that. Well, they reject all of that, and and so you have like this cultural moment where there's a segment of young people who are trying to find the truth, and they're sheep without shepherds, man. Like there's nobody out there that is going to tell them the truth about any of these third rail topics that you're not allowed to talk about.
Mhm.
And so, right, what you end up having is people who, yeah, maybe they'll say things they shouldn't, right? Maybe they'll indulge in things they shouldn't. But these are people who are trying to find the truth, and you want to lead them and guide them, right? You don't condemn them. You don't say you're a bad person. I'm going to condemn you the same way, the fat, androgynous, purple-haired, lesbian is going to condemn you.
Mhm.
No, I'm not going to do that. So no, that's invalid. And two, like, I mean, this doesn't matter as much anymore because likes are private. But how often do white nationalists have to like your tweets before you start to wonder why you're trying? Like I say, we need to deport all the illegals now on Twitter. You're going to get some guys who Neil's not going to like that are click like on that tweet.
Yeah.
Um, because they want to have a country too, right? Just like I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And right, the church, here's the church doesn't care about those people, right?
Right. That's
does
the other
does
thing. Right.
does Neil's church care about these guys who are seeing these things?
No, they don't.
Does,
Yeah.
Pastor,
No.
does Pastor JD Greer think
That's
that we
that's
should
okay.
minister to those men?
I I gotta run in a minute,
All right.
but real quick, I mean, that's those are the good Samaritans on the wayside right now.
Yes. Yes.
I so we should talk about that in the future, but like
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
a lot of there are actual white nationalists or whatever, however they define it. There
They
are
would they would
people
just self-describe them as they would
they would
self-describe as,
self-describe
yeah.
themselves as a white nationalist, sure. Um, do you think they can get a job anywhere? Do you think
Oh, yeah.
they are completely pushed out of polite society? That's the
Yeah.
Good Samaritan situation
Yeah.
right there.
That's the guy beat
They
up on the side of the road, right? The guy
yes,
that's doxxed and
yes,
taken out and can never get a job now, right? And oh, Neil is the priest and the Levite. So, well, I got to get to worship. I don't want to get any of that filthy, nasty racism
yeah.
on me.
It might
Um,
rub off on him, and he might be desensitized to it,
yeah,
and if he's involved too much in people who speak like that, it might rub off on him, and so he would be concerned and leave. So it's like
yeah,
I actually do think about that a lot. There are a lot
yeah,
of people, heritage Americans, that are hurting and they're frustrated. And meanwhile, there are major books being published called White Rural Rage,
yes,
and they're on the receiving end of these types of polemical assaults.
yeah,
It's really interesting to me to see how often these people are forgotten by
yeah,
regime evangelicals and by the loudest prophets of approved and authorized
yeah,
evangelicalism.
yeah. Exactly. And the last point I'll make on all of this is just that there are, like, the fields are white for the harvest, right? I'm really not making a pun. Right? The fields are white for this, verbatim what the Bible says. And there are all of these people, like CJ's describing, like I'm describing, that they have no leaders whatsoever. They have no, and not only that, there are no Christian figures at all whatsoever that care about the things they care about, that are interested in them, are interested about their concerns, and and just want to love them, right? Want to have compassion for them. That they don't exist. They don't
Yeah.
exist. And they're going to be attracted to right-wing thought, right? They're going to come to us, right? That's a natural consequence of this, because the rest of the church does not care about these people at all. So I want them to come to me. I want to talk to these guys. Right? Oh, they might have ideas I disagree with. They might, Neil Shenvi might think he's a bad guy. I don't care.
Yeah.
I do not care. Right? These are human beings, right? Created in the image of God, that we are called to love. And people like Neil, people like Owen Strachan, people like J.D. Greer, right? David French, Russell Moore, all of these people, all of the regime evangelicals, they don't care about them, right?
Nope.
They want them to go away.
Mm-hmm.
They want them gone. So we care about them, right? I'm happy to talk to them. I'm happy to. I want them to listen to my sermons, right? I want to minister to them, right? I want to bless people that are being completely destroyed and hated,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's Christian charity. That's Christian love, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to do it. I'm not going to call these people bad and evil and racist. I want them to come to Christ. So,
Yeah.
on
We
that
talk.
note, anything else to add before we sign off?
Not really. Everyone's been talking more and more about like the Carl Schmitt phenomenon on the alt right. So I have a piece on American Reformer on Carl Schmitt. So maybe we'll talk about that next time.
We should.
We've got
We definitely should.
lots to talk about. But anyways, I gotta run.
And yes, he just got to run. Before he goes, we want to tell you to, you can sign up if you want to sign up for the Chud Stack. We've both been so busy that we haven't been able to update things and there's a lot of content I want to put on there very soon. We're going to have our special guest for the month. The month is closing out. So go to contramundumpodcast.com. You can sign up there, and it helps out a lot. Or just like and subscribe here on YouTube. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening and watching. Please stay peacefully dangerous, and we will see you next time.